I was in a design critique meeting with the information department of the Swedish Parliament yesterday, and they're designing a technologically mediated live action role-playing emulation of being a parliamentarist politician in Sweden, which is going to run for 2 classes of 7th to 9th graders every day for the next 10 years. And all the different parties have their opinions. We're working with this with Lean Education, which is a Gothenburg-based company. They are beautiful and wonderful. And all of the different parties, of course, have like opinions on how they are being depicted and how the parliamentary process is being depicted and so on. So it was a full, heavy day. I had one thought during that meeting, which I think says something about how skewed my perspective and strange my perspective as a game designer is. I think when most people saw our new vice talman, Björn Söder, they thought, like I did somewhere on the side, like, what the hell, do we have a racist like in that top position in parliament? But to me it was, wait a minute, this vote was made closed and people voted against their party line. You have expressively told me not to use that game mechanic in my game, and now you're using it. What is this? You're cheating. But yes, I want to chat or rant and rave, freeform a little bit about some ideas that have been popping up in my head and 2 of my most intense collaborators. First and foremost, a big shout out to Adriana Skarped, whom has been my partner in crime for the last 10 years or something, and Linus Andersson, my stepbrother, who will have reason to return to later. This is Beckomberga Mental Hospital in 2006. Let me tell you, that was a scary place. The hospital had been abandoned for the last 6 to 10 years. There were stories that patients were returning to the cellars, living there, returning to the only place where they felt stable. The lighting is horrible. It looks like a David Fincher set. When Linus came into this place, he was visibly shaking. His heart rate was elevated. He was sweating. He was hardly able to do the scouting run of the place we're doing because we were going to revisit it. An hour later, he comes back. And about half an hour after walking the corridors all alone, without us, he realizes that his pulse isn't even raised. His sweat doesn't break, and he's in perfect calm. Wait a minute, what happened in that hour before the first and the second visit? Did he run into like a kick-ass cognitive psychologist? Just broke him out of his pattern of fear of the dark? I can tell you what happened. Role-playing happened. The second time he returned, he was in character as a security guard responsible for guarding this place. Okay, let me get this straight. So his entire bodily reactions are completely changed in the 1 hour that he has been pretending to be an abusive security guard. Okay, there is something going on here. So I want to talk about role-taking and immersion, which is possibly the worst defined word in the vocabulary of experience design. I want to talk about a specific, almost mythological kind of immersion, which is the character immersion, when you lose yourself in a live-action role-playing context so much that it feels like somebody else is holding the steering wheel, not you any longer. Since I know that you've been talking about the broad range of experiences, I want to make a very, very quick introduction to immersive live-action role-playing, Nordic style. And before we go on with my ideas and thoughts and ramblings on this subject that we developed together. So without further ado, I want to show one of the few documentations there are of people actually being in character that presents it in a fairly good way. This is all footage from a game that me and Cecilia Dolk and a cast of 80 other brilliant organizers pulled off a year ago called the Monitor Celestra. It's an immersive game inside a military ship which is decked out is exchanged with lightning and technological props to become a spaceship in the colonial fleet of the Battlestar Galactica TV series universe.
They are not considered an immediate threat, and they are preparing a delegation to come on board the Celestra to discuss what they call our common future. As one of the Verge's executives has been vetted out in the airlock.
And the Colonial Marines are only here to supervise and support the Celestra crew in running the ship.
So from this moment I declare martial law by the power invested in me by the military and the civil law.
Look, you're not taking away the power from my people. Look.
This power is not the attempt to do a blind jump, but it will cut power and everything else as well.
We have jumped successfully, people.
Just take it easy. Just take it easy. Okay, I want to go up there.
And do it.
But I need help. Okay.
Do it. You take him, Marine. You take him to the bridge.
Take him there, but just explain to me first. What are our options here?
Our options are we need to take down the AI before it infiltrates all systems.
If you get me up there, I can fix this. Okay.
Live-action role-playing can cover any wide range of subject matters or forms. You have been getting a deep insight into the game Till Death Do Us Part during this conference. Other examples range from interpretations of Thomas Winterberg's movie The Celebration via what we normally read as live-action role-playing, Tolkien-esque fantasy war stories, which are played with a massive amount of handcrafted props and so on in the forest, to find treatments of social or psychological issues. But you also share the same mechanics, which is you take on a character and you play it with others as if it was more or less real during an extended period of time. Why do people do this? I have absolutely no idea. I can only answer for myself personally. To me, the moment of losing myself is the greatest treasure that any role-playing exercise can offer. The extreme peak experience of LARPing. This has been a highly debated subject. It's almost a dirty word to talk about immersion in the Nordic LARP scene today. Why? Because of course it's totally impossible to prove. It is entirely anecdotal, and it can be such a wide range of sensory impressions that we interpret as being immersed and as losing ourselves. One of the first theoreticians raising this is Miki Pohjola, whose theories on elletyminen or immersion in the 90s sort of struck a very deep chord in me. I said, oh, you're onto something. You're trying to formulate something that we're all feeling, that we anecdotally share. But what can we do with it? I have no idea. So this has kept my interest throughout the years. And when I did some studies in theater studies, I found one mention of immersion, or trying to explain what immersive acting is in an unlikely place, which is this guy, which is Denis Diderot. In his Paradoxe des Comédiens, he writes about cold acting and hot acting. Hot acting being the actor who goes up and feels on stage, who's filled with the moment, who really believes that she is there in the moment. And he says that it's all good and fine when it's a good day, and she really believes it, but it can go up and down and all sorts of, and sometimes the emotion that she's feeling doesn't carry, but she's clearly engaged and crying and so on. Maybe it's a better way to be cold and contemplative, have the hot experience in the rehearsal, and be cold and calculating on stage. This has become the dominant method of acting today. Even Stanislavski, who places very great value on realistic rehearsal processes and feeling the character, says that this should happen before, never on stage. So losing yourself in the performance. This is not me. This is a character in the game Between Heaven and Sea, which is Emma Wislander's seminal piece, which deconstructs gender and creates a meditative society based on a 16-hour cycle. It's one of the most powerful immersive experiences that I've ever had. And it has left clear traces in me. Every time I see Jaakko, I get calm. Because he was my calm husband who sort of took care of my dramatic broken heart and grounded me. And I'm still grounded by him, even though he's not the same character at all anymore. Nor is this me. This is from last summer. I have a terrible pain threshold. I hate pain. I think I'm the worst wuss in the world when it comes to like getting pinched. Like, This guy is a flagellant. He's a self-torturer. And I can tell you, in those moments where I like sort of ecstatically, for all different sorts of dramatical reasons, happened to end up in that zone when I lost control of myself, I did not feel the pain of the whip, or in this case, the spine of a lamb, which I used to flagellate myself in some sort of bizarre idea, because yeah, that's what you do, I guess. The anecdotal experience of immersion is often described as loss of self. The character is not there. No, you are not there, but the character is there. You're being pulled on a sort of inexorable train of experience. It's often described as momentary and ecstatic. You can work for hours to that little moment when it happens. And you get excuses like, I'm sorry for punching you so hard. It was just my character, or spitting in your drink, or whatever. And also people who sort of have a liberating science of, I never imagined myself doing that. We stumble about and we try to find methods of generating this system, all of them based on unclear data and no idea what we're doing. But some basic tools we use is try to make the illusion as perfect as possible. Does this help or not? I have no idea. A powerful cultural context that so you feel that you're shifted to another social system, which is not your normal social system. So, a strong alibi. It can be anything from alcohol when people loosen up a bit, having it as a pedagogic exercise where you're apparently supposed to lose yourself, or in a very important political context, which allows you to go as far as you want. Physical action is usually used. Fake it until you make it. Just be a cold actor until the emotions come. Smile and you will be happy. And acceptance of other people's characters. If somebody plays the king, of course, raise his status. And when two people are in this immersed state or pretend immersed state, they help each other to go further. When immersion is described, it sounds something like this. The mind must be exalted until it loses consciousness of self. The role player must be carried forward blindly by a force, which, though in him and of him, is by no means that which he is in his normal state of consciousness, what he calls I. Just as the poet, the lover, the artist is carried out of himself in a creative frenzy, so must it be for the role player. This could have been something that Adriana said, something very, very typical about the ecstatic approach to role-playing. But it's not, it's this dude. Aleister Crowley, the father of modern Satanism and black magic, the great beast. So let's look a bit more at his methods and see if we can learn something about immersion and ecstatic states. What is called in Thelema, which is his system, channeling a deity or a god is called invocation. And what he writes that there are 3 basic methods of getting there, to identifying with the deity, of having the deity to speak through you. First is devotion, which is devotion to God, which is attained by love and surrender for the context, for the religious context. The second one is calling forth, where you take one aspect of yourself and concentrate on that, and you push that forward. The third one, which he calls the most superior, is attained by sympathy, to lose yourself completely in the subject of a play or a novel. But for those that can do so, this method is unquestionably the best. What is going on here? These things are fairly similar. These are commonly used LARP techniques. What's going on here? Wait a minute. Were they right? The idea that the detractors of role-playing in the 1980s, which equated Dungeons & Dragons, tabletop role-playing, LARPing, with occult practice. What the hell? What if they were right? What if we're all doing that all the time? Okay, so let's base a LARP campaign series around that premise, which is exactly what we did with Placebo-like, which is based on the idea that when we role-play, we're actually channeling true entities. In this case, we channeled forth 25 revolutionaries, thinkers, and visionaries from the past who are dead, who came back and lived in the streets of Stockholm for a month. It was an attempt at seeing under what difficult circumstances can you get this feeling of immersion, elimination of self, and the feeling of being somebody else, the feeling of being possessed. So we just used all the techniques we could, and it turns out it is really, 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 really hard to immerse in your normal social context, even if you're using all the tricks of the trade from occultism. It is almost impossible when your social situation is fixed. If you're out in the streets or you're visiting a cafe, that will work so hard against you that it's very, very hard. It still succeeded a few times. People are reporting things like, I was cooking at home, and suddenly my inner spirit, my character said, what the hell, you're using eggs? That's like murder. You're eating dead children. And of course, it was a vegan spirit that was speaking through him, and just threw away the eggs. So of course it happens, but not on the same level as we got, and not with the same astounding results as in closed environmental spaces where you really, really push the envelope. 2 players during the Monitor Celestra reported that they had severe claustrophobia. When they arrived and saw the boat, there's that, it doesn't have windows, you know that? No, it does not. It is very cramped. It's like, we have claustrophobia. We're not going to be able to do this. It's impossible. I can't be in a room without a window. I said, give it a shot. And 2 days later, they come out smiling, like nothing has happened. And these are people who say that, I can't be in a room with a closed door. What the hell? What's going on? That's too weird. Because did they momentarily succeed in what their like cognitive behavioral therapy has failed for all those years? What is this thing? Is it magic? Is it what we can call a flow experience? We have high challenge and high skill, so we experience as the flow, interchangeable flowing of events, and that's the kick. Is it temporary insanity? Is the stress reaction? Is the blatant lie? Nobody is ever immersed. You're saying that to be special. You're constantly thinking about yourself and so on. Immersion is a lie. Is the change of perception? Is it a study? I grew so confused with this that I just had to call my brother-in-law, who happens to be an associate professor and PhD at Umeå University in cognitive science. I was like, okay, you gotta explain to me, what is the current state of thinking on this? Why does it work? I was like, okay, take a deep breath. Let's try and explain this. So this is his explanation. It's a hypothesis. There is absolutely there's no actual proof for this. It's a hypothesis. These are a common understanding of sensory perception. When tissue detects the prick of a needle, our brain registers pain in scale to the tissue damage. Of course, the harder we push, the more pain. This is common understanding. This is connected to a theory called homeostasis. Homeostasis means that the body strives for equilibrium. As soon as it's pushed out of its comfort zone, it can temporarily reinterpret the world differently, but it will always come back to the same level. And this is not just in your mind or anything like that. This is the entire system that is traditionally, medicinally believed to return to a balance point. Meaning that if you have been overweight for a long time, for instance, lost that weight, your body will still pretend or still believe that it's overweight and return to that state of metabolism, for instance. Is this really true? Do we really perceive things that clearly, and is it really, like, do we always return to that state? Okay, let's look at some sensory impressions. And this is where you guys come in a little bit. What do you see? Squibbly lines, not much. Okay, say this. If you have already done this, please don't call out. You're looking for something in the right part of the picture. Still nothing? You're looking for something in the right part of the picture in the blue lines. Anybody shout it out as soon as you see it? You are looking for the shape of a creature. Anybody? Horse. You got it. What was first the squiggly lines is suddenly, can everybody see it? The horse, there's the hoof, there's the leg, there's the head. By changing your expectations about what you're going to see, your senses work differently. Okay, let's try this one out. What's this? Yep. You got it. Because did everybody see a head of a cow? No. But if you do this, boom, 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 suddenly a bit different, right? Yeah. Okay, how about this one? Where is the blue dot? Yeah, in what corner? Is it? Anybody have another opinion? Yeah, it's going back and forth because your stimuli is uncertain. Okay, this has led for the last 5 years to a very different perception of the stasis of human organism. Oh shit, I need to speed up. Okay, so what if we are constantly in this state of negotiation with everything we see all the time? There is no set point, there is no homeostasis. We set our own set points based on our expectations. Because if we get pain, and we know that it is non-lethal and within the playful context, the immune system and all of your concrete physical secretions will be less than if you believe that the pain is dangerous. Completely different. So, and the set point moves according to our expectations. Very quick examples. It is apparently, according to my brother-in-law, an accepted fact among psychology students that women have lower pain threshold than men. If you put 2 bowls of cold water on a table, have 2 students place their hand on it, the woman will first take out the hand. But if the person giving the instruction says, this is a special case. In this case, women and men have exactly the same pain threshold, and it's about 90 seconds. You will have a completely different result. They will both have their hands there for the same time, because they are both validated to do that, and they will both remove the hand about 90 seconds in. If you put somebody in the terrible noise chamber and tell them there's no way for you to get out of here, and you need to do that in order to get your money, they will have very, very high levels of stress in their body, like measurable through different immune systems. If you say there's a button there, you can push it at any time, and it will stop, they will not push the button. Same level of noise, everything, but they will not, those substances will not be excreted. Most extreme example that I can possibly think of, bone curses. If an Aboriginal tribe decides that somebody's got to die, this is how they do it. They all go around and say to the shaman, this guy is going to die. And he takes out the kangaroo bone and he sharpens it and points it at the person who's going to die and say, you are dead. That person dies within 3 days. Did not work on the Prime Minister of Australia, unfortunately, because he was not in that thought context. Robert Anton Wilson, great author and philosopher, the late great Robert Anton Wilson, phrased it like this: what a thinker thinks, the prover proves. What's the consequence of this? Every kind of psychological or physiological effect, from irritation to death, can be generated by this. And it's not just in your head. In pharmacology, up to 50% of effect can be attributed to the placebo effect. Completely not very well understood effect. These are real physical changes triggered by our bodies. Depression is just as real as a broken bone. There's no difference between your head and your body unless you believe in the spiritual existence outside of your body system, and then a lot of this is irrelevant. But as long as you go with material science, this is how it works. Your brain is your body. It's all one interconnected systems. So who are the current experts at generating these sort of placebo-like effects? I would say cognitive behavioral therapists think that they are. The Freudian psychologists not so much, or they've been sort of proven that they can't do jack shit. And of course, magicians, occultists like Anton LaVey, cult leaders, and Miriam. The entire Nordic LARP scene are hyper experts at generating states of changing the allostatic system into generating specific effects. We can say, play a ninja and you're going to be really sneaky and your heart rate is going to lower. We can say, yeah, play a clown and you're going to have less stage fright. What if this is the explanation? The pleasure we derive from immersion is the pleasure of changing, the pleasure of adapting, which is a major evolutionary trait. So why would we not get pleasure from something that is so important to us that we can be dropped in any context and conquer it? Because we can move the set points, our expectations. This has interesting consequences on the theory of bleed. Why do we feel, why do we interpret the world so differently after a LARP? Why do we have so many reports of people hearing commands from the monitor Celestra when they go to IKEA? They're like, oh, I was now ordered to the bridge. I know it, I heard it. People have even heard verbatim words. After Between Heaven and Sea, I went out what the hell? People are divided into this strange, arbitrary two things, and some have little things there and long pants. I don't understand what's going on. What's this gender thing? And so, I mean, the bottom line is, there is no you. There is a constant renegotiation of what is you and what you perceive as important. Okay, can we study this? Because right now, this is all conjecture, all hypothesis. We know that we have a powerful experience that is very pleasurable. It's sort of like an orgasm. I'd say it's LARPing orgasm, being somewhere in the immersion field. But we can't prove it. We have no idea. It's like we're pre-50 sex studies at this point. So what me and Linus cooked up was we need to do a LARP around this, of course. And all players need to wear sensors, pretty much like the ones that we used earlier, but with full body and so on, so we can test everything as a part of the fiction, because we don't want to disturb immersion. My idea is the silent death, a society living under the constant threat of an airborne virus. So they measure their blood temperature, they have constantly rigged up to sensors that they measure, so the scientists get their data all the time and can do tests without breaking the fiction. And the simulation system to simulate the plague is the taste of vanilla. Can we generate very adverse physical reactions to the taste of vanilla just by people believing that they will die if they smell vanilla? Because in the game, if you smell vanilla for 2 minutes, you will die or you will go into the sick ward and you will be treated specially. So you will have a reason to fear it. Can we generate that? Can we measure that? If we can do that, we can see the differences between interpretation of somebody who reports that they were in the game and smelled and had reactions, that we can measure what happened in their body then. And somebody said, no, I was completely unaffected by the game. I was only there, I was only smelling vanilla. What will happen? How do we do it? We can research this intensely and try to see what actually works, what actually does generate the feeling of a set change within the allostatic system. So are there any design parameters or any design tips to design for this ecstatic condition? Maybe. Here would be some of my ideas. I think it's sort of this hypothesis suggests an aesthetic because you want to have measurable change. So all of the sort of subtle nuances are out, which accidentally ties really well into my own personal aesthetic of maximalism. More is more. Because we want to affect as big changes in set point as possible. We want peak experiences, things that people experience like falling in love, taking a psychedelic drug, climbing to the top of the mountain. Those large experiences, those are the ones that are most easily to measure. So pushing your players to beyond their prior limits would be useful, having controlled experiences in space and time, having maybe measurable themes of hate, sorrow, anxiety, and reinterpreted senses, using smell, temperature, touch, etc., and reinterpret them. And in this purely scientific test perspective, emotionally powerful would overrule political, unless, of course, the political engagement becomes emotional engagement. This is just a wild hypothetical theory, but what I aim at is bringing immersion back to the table, not as an unknown, wishy-washy, impossible to prove thing, but as something that we treasure, hold dear, aspire to, and maybe even can prove is a deep and important part of the human learning experience and what it means to be human. Thank you very much.